Today, I want to talk about a few different things and see how I can weave them together, primarily focusing on faith over fear and how that's shifting from one state of being to another, how that brings us into how do we live authentically. And the third thought form that has come into my mind this morning is who's really in control? Is it us? Is it life? Is it the universe? Are we being guided? Are we engaging in co-creating? I find this to be such a fascinating topic because I hear kind of not opposite ends of the spectrum, but very different angles. But that's actually an interesting word, angle, because I just listened to a brilliant talk by Terrence Howard saying there are no straight lines in the universe. And yet man has tried to explain things in straight lines. And this is why I often say it's never a linear process. What we're experiencing in life is often cyclical or circular or squiggly even, But he's saying the fastest point from one point to the other is not a straight line. It's a curved like arc in space. So I want to tie all of these things together because I think we're in such an interesting, fascinating point in time and human evolution. And we're getting into the layers and into the nuances of existence. And I want to really simplify it because that's what I like to do. I like to take complex topics and really simplify them so that we can understand what is the state of being. How do we embody all of this massive change, and how do we shift our perspective so that we can live in a far more harmonious way within ourselves, with one another, and with, let's call it, existence itself. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So, faith over fear. So, continuing on from last week, I've really made this choice to, what if I just stopped trying? I've taken a huge leap of faith and, arrived to a place that I never visited before and, a new land, new language, new people, all of these things. And in that there's a reason why we call it a leap of faith, right? It's a leap of faith because it's a huge unknown, and we have no way of actually trying to control the outcome because it's a leap of faith, right? You don't hear someone say, I'm going to control this leap of faith. I'm going to know exactly how to project myself and where I'm going to land and how it's all, it's not a mathematical equation in that sense where you can have the precise answer to the question, right? It's a leap of faith because you're throwing yourself into an unknown. And this is what I find is so interesting because it's like, well, you could say all of life is an unknown. It's all an unknown to our conscious mind, at the very least, to our human self. It's all a great unknown. And we spend so much time and energy trying to make it controlled, trying to know it, right? And anticipate it and predict it. And, I understand that gives us a sense of relief. And I see this play out in so macro and micro, right? People that are wanting to control their lives, their relationships, the people in their life, their job, their everything, right? Micromanaging, you could say. But also you could see this in a huge macro lens, from a huge macro lens of, trying to control nature or trying to control and fix how the universe even works. And I always find it just kind of funny. And I don't know why it reminds me of the saying, how do you make God laugh? You tell him your plans. It's we're trying to make something that is constantly growing and expanding and in motion. We're trying to fix it and make it solid and absolute. And so why am I saying this? Because I think what has been so interesting about this journey, which at times has been unnerving, I still don't know where I'm going to live next month. So it's unnerving to the part that wants to have control, that wants to know, that wants to have things fixed and solid. But what I've learned so much about this process of just taking a massive leap of faith into the unknown is you fall into a very different flow of life. and you fall into almost like a completely different dimension where you have to trust. You have to trust, and it is the third aspect, and I'll talk about living authentically after, but the first and the third seem to fit rather well. It's like, who's in control? Is the universe totally in control? Am I in control because I am co-creating this, and where you could say you make your reality. This is a simulation, but your intention, your choices, your energy, your frequency make your reality. Is it a dance between both? This is a partnership. Are we co-creating? I hear one person, I forget his name now, speaking about how, like, to fall into the flow, we've got to really trust that everything is happening for us. Like, get out of controlling it. Like, everything is happening for us exactly as it knows how to. And so from that perspective, you could almost say, well, we don't have any control. We're just following the flow of the river. But what he was speaking to is that our higher self, or the oversoul, some people call it, that is the part that knows. That is the part that's guiding us. That's the part that's like, okay, I've come down. I want to incarnate into human form to learn these lessons. But sometimes the human gets in the way, because the human, he was actually quite comically describing it. The human, the ego goes, no, I want to do it this way. I know how I want to do it. And he's like, okay, fine, go there. Then don't listen to me. I won't guide you. You're going to fall in. There's a hole right there. You're going to fall into that hole. And lo and behold, the human falls into the hole. And so it's like, okay, the soul goes, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to help you out of the hole. Here you go. Let's dust you off. Okay, now will you trust me? No, I want to do it this way. He's like, okay, fine, go off and do it again. You're going to fall into another hole. And it's interesting. It's comical. There's no right, wrong, good, or bad. So this idea of who's in control, I don't like using the word control, because actually I think what we're learning right now, and especially as there's so much more vocabulary and conversation around frequency. And this makes me really excited, because I think I've always tuned into this because I'm such an energetically sensitive person. But the fact that it's coming into mainstream language is really exciting, because when you get into frequency, like let me use an analogy. When you sit and you go listen to a live piece of like orchestral music, you're feeling it, right? You're feeling the vibration of the music, of the sound. You're not seeing it. You're not trying to figure it out. There's no straight line through it. There's no it's you're feeling, you're having this experience where you are absorbing the sound. And this is what's so amazing about kind of sound healing, is that it's not just something that you hear with your ears. It's something that you are literally absorbing into your entire being. And we're not just this body, right? We have so many different layers, so many different bodies. And what we're learning right now is we're attuning. I really like this word attuning. It keeps on coming into my mind, because it really is about that. It's like getting a tuning fork and really attuning ourselves to our own existence and to everything around us. And our whole senses are changing as well. And so we're feeling in, we're attuning, we're absorbing the experience around us. And that's what's going to bring us into harmony. But what we've been doing for so long is analyzing. And analyzing is so linear and angular and kind of rigid, and I need to figure it out, and I need to stay stuck in this process, and it's very logical, and it has to be rational, and it's very left-brained, and it's very kind of like chunky, right? I keep on seeing angles and like square boxes, whereas really existence is spherical. It's forever expanding. It's like when you throw a pebble into water and you don't have squares coming out of it, right? You have ripples of concentric circles. So we are that, and we're attuning to this. And the reason why I'm starting to bring this into the conversation beyond just like looking at our human self and like how to be with emotions and how to be with insecurities and sensations in the body is because we're actually getting to a point in our evolution where we can begin to talk about the whole context that we're in. right? And I've always been very curious about our humanity, but it's in the context of how is your divinity, how is your spirit, how is your soul? Because as I spoke about last week, we are in a partnership. We cannot do this life without the other. So we have to include both. We can't just jump to the spiritual and leave the human behind, but we can't just stay in the human and forget about the spiritual, about the soul, the oversoul, because just such a huge piece of the puzzle is missing. Now, some people might be listening to this and go, well, how is that not just like religious dogma? How do you know that that's true? And I think what was actually really beautiful that Terrence Howard spoke about, and I was so actually excited about this because you know how I shared that I have a memory from being in utero in my mom's belly. He shared a memory that he had when he was about 6 months. It was like something just like he woke up. And when he woke up in the womb, the first thing that he caught himself saying was, remember, no, sorry, don't forget. And so there was a stream of consciousness that he, as the soul, as consciousness, as energy, as he calls it, that was going to incarnate into human form, wanted to remember this piece of information. And so the way that he describes it is that we're energy that is constantly reinventing and rebooting itself, right? We take different forms. But there's a stream of consciousness, you could call it, that he's taking on these ideas of physics that he was figuring out, the flower of life, when he was 6 years old, because he remembers it from before. He carried that energy, he carried that consciousness, and consciousness is in everything. We are it, right? And I think this is what's brilliant, because we're going to just explode our very, very tiny pinhole of a perspective of existence in ourselves, and it's going to like open up into being able to see all that is. I like, I always sometimes kind of struggle, like, well, what do I want to call it? I never called it God. Called it universe a lot, but even universe is just a part of the omniverse, so that feels too small. Spirit, source, but the creator of all that is, I find, is really interesting. I mean, then you could even say, well, who's the creator of the creator? These are questions that I asked myself as a child, as I kept on feeling things expanding and expanding and expanding, and going, well, what's beyond that? What's beyond that? What's beyond that? And you know what? There doesn't need to be an answer. But I love this aspect of all that is, because we're coming into just isness. All that is, all of it is isness, right? It just is, and we can't argue with that. I know I'm going really far out, so just stay with me, because I'm gonna hone it in and bring it into the embodiment of being human. But the reason why I think it's important to have this conversation and to expand ourselves in this way is because then all of a sudden it gives such an amazing container and context for why are we here. I've been chatting with a lot of people recently, and it's very fascinating for me to what's happening is I'm chatting with people that they don't have a spiritual belief, but they're very curious as to why am I here? And they do believe in a kind of energy. And so I've had really interesting conversations, even just snippets of them, of really starting to kind of like, churn the butter in a way, of just starting to stir the pot of like, okay, yeah, why is that such a fascinating question for humans? Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Why do I even exist? And I don't think it's a coincidence that this question is coming up more and more. And this question is coming up more and more with people that are not in the quote unquote spiritual community. And I actually think we're breaking out of this, because even spirituality can get dogmatic, it can get angular, it can get, rigid. And that's why sometimes I think, well, I don't even know how to describe myself. I don't like labels to begin with, but like what label would even fit, right? Because everything is about the meaning that we give it to, right? That we assign it to. So when you have this context that can seem so vast and far out, and you're like, why? What is the meaning? Why am I here? If we're coming from a lower density fear place, we're going to try and figure it out from a logical place. We're going to try to analyze. We're going to try to nitpick. We're going to try and think, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? What is going? We get into the kind of angular judgments of our existence. Whereas going into the expansive state that everything is being held in this kind of container of just isness, of consciousness itself, that brings us, that invites us to go into that leap of faith. And it's in the leap of faith where the most magic occurs, because that, to me, I think is the point of all creation. It's almost, you could say, like the creator of all that is took a massive leap of faith to just create all that is, right? Like, well, let's see. I don't know what's going to happen with this. This is going to be one grand experiment. So bringing it back down into the micro and into the human experience, it's not easy to go from the kind of lower density fear base context and into the what they're calling more of a fifth dimensional faith context, because we have to relinquish this idea that we have control. But losing control doesn't mean that we're out of control. Losing control, letting go of control, means that we can relax and soften and fall into the flow of being guided by our higher self that knows, that can see more than we can see with our human eyes, that can feel more than we can feel with our human senses and body. But the beauty is that when we connect to that part, we get to, like, it's like the antenna that can attune to the radio channel. And then all of a sudden we get to download all of the information that our soul knows, that the soul can see, sense, feel. It's like, I mean, it just sounds so corny to use this, but it's kind of like tuning into a GPS system where all of a sudden you have the signal to the satellite, and then all of a sudden the map is there, right? You still have to take it step by step by step, but there is a map. We are being guided. But the confronting part is that we're having to really step beyond our logical, rational left brain mind. And the reason why I want to talk about this in the I'm looking outside and it's raining. It's so beautiful because it just hasn't rained in forever, so it's really lovely. The reason why I want to talk about this when it comes to our self-development is because we can really get stuck into the kind of nitty-gritty. We can get stuck in the over-analysis, and we're just keeping ourselves in. Remember, I talked about like the teeny tiny box. You know, we're keeping ourselves so contained. And I think sometimes we take ourselves far too seriously. And allowing ourselves to come more into a spherical space of opening up and expanding and coming into this place of like, well, what if I could just know and trust that I am being guided? That there is no right or wrong way, but that me trying to control it and figure it out, firstly, takes a tremendous amount of effort. And secondly, what if it actually hinders or gets in the way of what could be possible? You know, people have talked about this of like, oh, when you manifest, you know, sometimes even just what you imagine, like what if life could even be better than what you imagine? What if your imagination is even just limiting what is actually possible and available for you and to you? And it's like people go, oh no, I don't deserve all that, right? No, that's not possible. That doesn't make sense. That's not rational, right? I think the whole context of the way that we perceive existence is going to be like blown through the roof. That's my sense right now. And so it's even hard to articulate it and put words to it because it is augmenting our reality. So a way to really embody this in a physical, real way is to put yourself into unknown situations. So that's what I'm doing. And that's where I'm really tapping into this, because I'm putting myself into an unknown situation again and again and again. And the great thing about that is like you become the beginner, you become the student. You know, all the sages would say like you always have a beginner's mind. You know, the moment that you think you know, That's it. We've limited it, right? It's like, it's great to get to the point of like, the more I know, I realize I know nothing. And that's great, because out of that nothingness comes everything. And that's where, if we really trust the unknown, that's where everything is created from. And that, like, the void isn't just empty and nothingness and lifeless. It's full, it's vibrant. It is the spark, it's the electric spark that is like the starter lighter, whatever it's called, to the boiler kind of thing, right? It's the thing that ignites all of existence. So we are having to let go of generations, thousands of years of living from a place of fear and trying to control and trying to make happen and just trying in general, and feeling like we have no external support or guidance system, which then the irony becomes we go to an authority to tell us what to do. And who's to say that authority knows better? Who's to say that that authority has our best interests at hand, right? We've lost our own inner GPS system. We've lost our own inner knowing and wisdom, but we're remembering it, right? We've forgotten. Let me say we've forgotten rather than lost it, because we can never really truly lose it. We just forget it. So coming into faith, I think, ironically gives us a greater sense of control. But like I've been saying, it's the wrong word. Coming into faith brings us into a greater space of alignment. So right now I'm really playing with, okay, what if I stop trying? I'm going to stop trying. You know, like my biggest fear right now, which is an instinctual fear and need, is I don't know where home is going to be next month. But I'm like, well, what if I didn't spend my time worrying, like trying to figure out where and what? And every time I try and go online and I go on Airbnb or I go onto these other websites, I kind of end up getting really screwed by it, because I think I find something and then they're like, no, it's not available. It's summertime, so it's a vacation rental, so it's going to be quadruple the amount. And so I keep on meeting dead ends. And yet, like, if I watch already the unfoldment, like, it still hasn't gotten there, but a potential has gotten there where, you know, when I first got here, I had this issue with my tooth. My veneer fell off, and it was like, that was a big, like, oh, I can't. Why is this happening to me? I felt like such a victim of it. It felt terrible. It was too much for me to handle in that moment. And then, you know, trying to find the dentist, and third time lucky, I found a dentist that was completely from intuition, looking on Google Maps. And that ended up being like just beautiful, like the whole team of women, just brilliant. And then one of them tells me about like all these ecstatic dances. And so I go to an ecstatic dance, and at the ecstatic dance, I, you know, meet this beautiful woman that, you know, opens up this other circle, and I meet this other woman that's saying, oh, I can rent you my place over the summer. Will I take her place? I don't know, but there you go. There's an opportunity. There's a possibility. There's a choice point that I can go, okay, I could live there. But that opened up through a sequence of events, the dot that connects to the dot, that connects to the dot, that connects to the dot, by a process of trusting, by a process of faith, by a process of not knowing what the next step and the next dot is going to look like. But when you go, okay, I put my hands up, I'm not going to control this, I'm not going to search for it in the normal way, and I'm going to let my soul guide me, I'm going to let life guide me. It's not about control or not control, it's about having trust and faith and following and listening. That then it unfolds, and all of a sudden there's a trajectory or a potential trajectory. I have free will, so I can make the choice. Do I want to go down that path, or maybe another path will unfold? But it's a different way of getting there. Now, on one hand, you can say, oh, well, that's not very efficient. I just want to look online and, like, you know, find the place and book it. Like, sure, great, but that seems to be impossible for me right now. It's not happening. So I feel like the whole thing is teaching me, how do you do it in a different way? And actually, ironically, it's just going back to how we used to do it before internet. And there's something that's kind of really grounding about that, and actually very connecting, because now all of a sudden we realize we are a network, we're an electric circuitry as a collective and as a humanity. And what's happened over these last, you know, couple decades is that we've gotten so far away from each other, even though ironically in one way the internet has connected us, in physical form it's disconnected us, right? So it's like coming back to this point of everything is interconnected. And there's this beautiful tapestry and this beautiful web that weaves through and around us. And when we can take that leap of faith and we get out of fear and we get out of control and we get out of trying to figure out in a rational left brain way, we recognize that we're held in this beautiful web and we're supported in this beautiful web. Now, why is this important to talk about when it comes to, like, you might be like, Corinne, I'm trying to come to your podcast to figure out like who the fuck I am and why am I here and how do I live authentically? How do I be in my authentic self? Well, we have to understand all of these things before we can really like get to know who we are. Because if you try to get to know who you are just from a cerebral, intellectual, conceptual place, a lot of people will analyze and understand what are their neuroses and their foibles and their fears and their triggers and blah, 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 all of that stuff. But if you don't drop into the embodiment, if you don't drop into the experience, the feeling, the emotion, the energy, the isness, the consciousness, what we are in a greater context, it all remains a concept and you can't evolve beyond it. I have had so many clients that say like, I get this, this, and this, and this, but nothing's changing. Yeah, because it's not going to change in the brain. It's going to change in the body. It's going to change in the experience. It's going to change in the energetic field. It's going to change through, yes, your perspective shifting, but perspective shifts by when we have a different experience of ourselves. So do you see how we have to stop compartmentalizing? We have to stop fragmenting and separating. We are not just the mind. We are, as I've shared before, we have 3 centers of intelligence. We're not just the physical body. We also have the emotional, auric, psych, all of these different fields of energy around us, these different bodies. We're having to really open up from pointed, narrow-minded vision to peripheral and beyond. And then things can happen much more instantaneously. We don't have to be in 20 years of therapy and analysis because it's not, the analysis kind of misses the point. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the entire puzzle, right? We're having to go from 2D to 3D, from flat to spherical, from the line to the arch, right? So we're outstretching everything so we can see it from every single aspect of that. And inside and outside, in front of, behind, above, below, to the side, to this angle, to like everything, right? 360. Now that might sound really complicated, but then when you draw all of that in and you come back to like a pinpoint in your heart, like I don't know if you've had the experience that when you sit in meditation and you just bring everything into the sensation, just into your heart, it's like a funnel. You can funnel all of your energy in, and that becomes like the seed of where everything is born from. And then from that, you can also expand out. You could see this as meta. What we're learning is the expansion and contraction, the micro and the macro, and knowing that they're not separate. And so when you go in and you do the internal work, that's why it's, you could call it, you're going into your inner verse. Look at how much is explored in the outer verse, in the universe, right? Oh, all of these planets, stars, constellations, this, that, and the other, black holes, void, this, that. What about your inner verse? That is filled, I would say even more so, with just infinite amount of, I don't even know, there is no word for it. I can't even use the word things, right? But it's infinite. And so we've got to really get curious about that, but also see that they're both one and the same. As within, so without, as above, so below. So how does that lead us into living authentically and really understanding who we are? And we're understanding who we are from a human level. Like, that's great. That's a huge part of the work. What are my foibles? What are my fears? What is my trauma? What are my belief systems? What are my patterns? How do I react to things? But a big part of the question too is, who am I as a soul? What is the essence of who I am? And asking yourself, why am I here? That's a profound question that doesn't necessarily need an answer because it's more about the questioning of it. But to really come into a place of living authentically, it's understanding the context of, yes, who we are as a personality, but who we are as a conscious being that is having this experience. And then when we're not so fixated in the teeny tiny square box and the angles and the analysis of who we are, then we don't take things so personally. And then we can have a lot more breathing room for us to experience, enjoy, and explore. And some situations might be comfortable and some not, and some sad and some challenging, some hard, some joyful, some scary. But it's all just in the context of like, oh, this is an experience. And so there's a comfort in I just get to be who I am, having this experience, feeling things come in and out of this body and this being and this state of existence, all of these feelings and emotions and senses that I'm having. And it's just moving through and with me, like I'm dancing it as it's unfolding. So I'm going to give you an example of when we reach this. I have to be mindful of saying this because I don't want to say, oh, I've reached this place and therefore I'm enlightened. No, not at all. But I had a really interesting experience with this on this topic yesterday. So I was invited to go to this, I had just met this really lovely, beautiful woman, and she invited me to come to this this kind of like circle where people come and they bring instruments, and some people are just using their voice, others are playing instruments, and it's just creating improvised music, and it's not like a song, it's not anything like that, it's just creating music that's completely improvisational. And so for me, my perspective on that is you're going and you're allowing like your soul to play, right? You're allowing your authentic expression to come in. And so whatever that person wants to play on the guitar or on the drums, and everybody's, yes, okay, there's a feeling into and there's a harmonizing, but it's also like, what is the authentic, spontaneous expression that wants to come through you? And having been a professional ballet dancer where I was so, as a dancer, you are scrutinized like crazy. It has to be perfect. Right? It's very claustrophobic for a spirit that wants to just be free and that wants to make mistakes. Like part of creativity is you try something out and you might make a mistake. You try, the sound might come out and it might go flat. It might go sharp. It might go like, oh, that's not the right key. Or you dance and you do this and you trip over and that's not quite it. But it's like in the exploration, we have to make mistakes. And it's not even a mistake. It's exploration, right? But when I come to these things, my feeling, my intention, my desire for it is that you get to just be free. Like I went to an ecstatic dance the night before and you get to just dance, move. There's no technique. Like you get to just be free. And so there's no talking and there's no interfering because it's really giving you, your body, your spirit, the permission to just be completely free and express itself in the way that it wants to express itself, right? There's no judgment, there's no criticism, there's no scrutiny, there's no technique, there's no structure, there's no nothing. It's free. So these two women are singing on the other side of the room. And I'm the type of person, I was just kind of letting myself feel it, but I'm also the type of person that I've always kind of seen layers in music and in sound. I guess that's why I really loved choreographing, because I would be able to see the movement of music. And so sometimes that meant that I was listening to the women and I was listening to the various instruments and I would just hear something that was like in between it, right? I wasn't copying the women. I wasn't copying the instruments. You could say it was harmonizing, but it was almost like I can literally see it in my mind. I would come in a different layer of it. And at one point, this lovely woman that invited me, I couldn't understand it word for word because I'm still learning Spanish. But she was basically saying, oh, if you feel it, tune in with them, like harmonize with them so that you're not going against it. And I thought, that's really interesting. So number one, testament to having done the work. Thank you very much to myself for dedicating that time. My younger self would have been really hurt by that. My younger self would have been like, you are trying to correct me. You are telling me that I'm doing it wrong. And I would have really been hurt by that because it would have felt like an infringement of my expression. In reality, I still think that is. I think it's totally inappropriate that she said that to me because it's not her circle. It's not a choir. We're not a band. We're not none of that. It's like freedom of expression, right? And so I actually think she did overcross a boundary because I would never go in and be like, oh no, you need to sing it like this. You need to be in this key. You need to do this tone. That's not the point of these kind of circles. Like if you're creating and writing a song together, okay, sure, then there might need to be some positive feedback, right? productive criticism, whatever you want to call it. But this was not that. So I do think she overstepped a boundary, but my younger self would have been really hurt, and I would have completely shut down. And I would have completely it's like being censored, So I would have censored myself. And in all honesty, I was quiet after a while. I was kind of I don't quite feel like I'm in a space where there is the safety to be free and to sing the way that I want to sing. Because I'm contending with she might tell me again, oh no, you're doing it wrong. You need to harmonize with them. But I thought also was very interesting. It's well, why, when we think of harmony, does it have to be the same as? Oh, I need to sing like them in the key, the tone that they're doing. Whereas actually whatever intuitively was coming through me was obviously seeing another layer, right? It doesn't need to be so rigid. And for me, it was interesting because I was playing off of it, right? I mean, did it sound terrible from the outside? I don't know. Frankly, I don't care because it was an exploration. But why am I sharing this? Because when we are living authentically, there is a dedication that we need to almost I don't want to say adhere to because it sounds too rigid and like a rule. But if we want to live authentically, it's there is this kind of, there's no word for it. It's not determination. It's not like a strength. It's a loyalty. That's what it is. A loyalty to ourselves, to take the risk to be who we authentically are, knowing that not everyone's going to get it. Maybe for somebody else, we're going to seem like we're out of key. But sing your tune. Be authentically you. We live in a society and a culture that is so too much on the you should, you shouldn't. This is how you should live your life. This is how you shouldn't live your life. This is how you should sing. This is how you shouldn't sing. I'm so over that. That what I feel like I'm preaching, my gospel is be you. You get to be you. You have your own tone, your own key, your own resonance. I love that in this, I don't remember the name of the tribe, but there was an African tribe where when the woman is calling in to want to conceive a child, she sings the song of that child's soul. And she sings that song whilst she's pregnant. And then when that child is incarnate, whenever the child or even when it's the adult, doesn't matter, kind of goes off piece a little bit. So let's say they're out of alignment, right? Maybe something, they're not behaving in such a way, or something's gone off a little bit. The tribe will come around and sing that soul's song to that being to remind them, this is who you are. This is your song. This is your tone. This is your frequency. And we each have our own unique fingerprint, sound print, right? So don't let anyone else tell you who you should be. And, I respect, I'm not angry at this woman because I kind of see it more of a reflection of well, where is she correcting herself, And we've all been there. We've all kind of judged or wanted to tell somebody how they should do it or control or whatever, whether we've done it to ourselves or to someone else or to a child or to a friend or to a partner. We've all done it. So I didn't take it so personal. I mean, I will if she does it again. I'm going to say, I'm not going to come to these circles unless I can have the absolute freedom to sing in the way that I feel like my being wants to spontaneously sing. Otherwise, it's not an authentic expression. It's a controlled expression. It's a criticized expression. It's a directed expression by you to me. And that's not freedom. That's like at an ecstatic dance, the person leading it coming up and being oh no, you're doing that movement wrong. You need to do it more like them. You need to harmonize with them. No, you don't. And the beautiful thing is that it's kind of there's a name for it and I don't remember, when they put all of grandfather clocks in a room, that over a month's time, around that time frame, they will all start to align and they'll tick at the same time. So in the beginning you might have and by the end they're all going tick tock tick tock. So, and actually, funnily, that TikTok, it reminds me, not TikTok, the app TikTok, which but just the word TikTok, is I felt like the women were ticking and I was talking. There was a tick-tock, tick-tock. And I liked it. There was something playful about it, but she wanted me to go tick, 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 right? So living authentically takes a kind of courage. It takes a kind of knowing, and the knowing comes from sitting in the experience of being who you are without judgment. And it's really trusting yourself, and it's trusting your higher self, and it's trusting life itself, and it's trusting the creator of all that is, and it's trusting the unknown, and it's going out into the outer verse and back into the inner verse, and everything that I've just been talking about, which you might go, God, that's way too far out, Corinne. But it brings us into this place of stillness, this pinpointed place that I mentioned in your heart, that gives you the greater I am, not the egoic I am, but the I am that is the isness of consciousness itself, in the unique imprint that you are as a soul. And you get to just be that. And I don't mean like, I'm not saying, well, I'm just me and I'm going to be an asshole and fuck you, don't tell me what to do. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you get to just be you. And by being that, we will all, if we were all attuned to our own key, we would naturally harmonize. We would not have to try. I think we wouldn't have to try anything. We would just fall into that beautiful flow that this guy Bashar was talking about, of like, fall into flow. Stop trying to figure it out. Fall into flow, and the river will guide you. And the river can be a metaphor for whatever you want to call it. God, the creator of all that is, your higher self, your soul, existence, consciousness, vibration, energy, electricity, love. They're all words to describe the feeling, the sense, the energy, the tone, whatever it is. These are all words to describe an experience. So I've really gone off on one, so I've got to hone it back in. So the invitation is, firstly, we've got to choose to come out of fear and into faith. We're jumping over dimensions. We're moving through dimensions right now. We're expanding. We've been in contraction for so long. We've been in an angular box, when actually we need to like open up the box and realize that there's like this whole world out there, right? So the invitation is, put yourself in situations, or try to perceive or imagine or look through the eyes of doing it differently, in a way that isn't controlled, isn't routine and monotonous. Do something new. Do something that stretches you. Try it in a new and different way, so that you expand yourself and you get out of the routine, out of the regular and the normal and the predictable, and into the unknown, so that you can practice faith. Faith is a practice. And what I mean by faith, I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm talking about, I am taking that leap of faith. I'm stepping into an unknown and I don't know. And like, faith is beyond even trust. Like, there is trust, but faith is like, all right, I'm all in, right? And I'm opening my arms and I'm diving off the cliff, and I have faith that I will fly. Then that naturally ties into, I think, we don't even need to have the answer of who's in control, because it's not about one thing controlling the other. It's about being in attune and working with together. That creates that flow, that creates that guidance. And so we don't need to control. We feel like we're in control because we're in harmony with, we're engaged with, we're in partnership with. We feel held and supported and guided. And so therefore, there's no need to control. And then out of that, we get to live authentically, because we can let go of all the shoulds and shouldn'ts. We can let go of all the labels and the constructs and the definitions and the things that box us in, and we get to just be free. And I think what ultimately we're all looking for is to feel free, so that we can just exhale and feel relief, that we don't have to try so damn hard, right? But to get to that point, it's a process of exploration. And in order to explore, we have to go beyond what we know. So go back to beginner's mind. Go back to knowing nothing and be curious instead. And see where that leads you. All right, I'll leave it at that. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.